My name is Arthur Vance. I'm 37. The world knows me as a prodigy in cyber warfare, a major general in the army. But looking at my reflection in the polished glass of this high-end hotel suite, all I see is a stranger. This plain black suit feels more like a costume than my own clothes. I'm trying to piece together the memory of family, of belonging, but the feeling is distant, like a signal I can no longer decode. My entire career is built on discretion. I don't share personal details. I secure classified information. It's a reflex at this point. But for the sake of clarity, I can give you the essentials. The official record is straightforward. I finished first in my class at the Citadel, followed by a master's in cybersecurity from Carnegie Mellon and an honorary doctorate from Stanford University. In the field, I spearheaded global cyber initiatives like Operation Crimson Shield and established the Phantom Strike Division from the ground up. I've faced congressional committees and received commendations from the Allied Command for work the public will never know about. It's a necessary darkness, the work we do to keep the world lit and safe. My current role is Director of Cyber Strategy Integration and Defense Relations for the Army's Digital Warfare Command. Put simply, I am the tip of the spear for America's digital defense. I direct America's cyber warfare initiatives and manage defense portfolios valued in the billions. To my family, however, none of that exists. They have no idea. Today, I am not General Vance. I'm just Arthur, the firstborn son, the estranged older brother. They see me as nothing more than an ordinary serviceman, the one who never seemed to amount to much. Right now, I'm standing on the curb outside the five-star Monarch Grand Hotel, the venue for my younger brother Leo's wedding. This place is a monument to opulence, looking more like a modern palace than a reception hall. Gleaming white marble pillars rise toward the sky. Through the towering glass doors, I can see the glitter of immense crystal chandeliers, their light spilling onto the plush red carpet that disappears deep into the building's main hall. A faint melody from a live jazz trio slips through the entrance, weaving through the sounds of polite laughter and the hum of conversations from the city's most influential people. I pull in a slow, steadying breath, the kind I take before a critical operation. My hand goes to my tie, a reflexive gesture to ensure everything is in place. My thumb brushes against the cold, familiar weight of my ring from the Citadel. This was for my mother, a promise made across a crackling phone line that I would be here for Leo's big day. A promise I had to keep, no matter that it's the first time I've set foot in my hometown in almost a decade. It's been 10 years since I walked away from all this, since I made a choice to follow my own code. I traded their world of galas and boardrooms for the stark reality of military barracks, the icy hum of secure server farms, and sleepless nights spent hunting shadows in the digital ether. The Vances are anything but an ordinary family. My father, Robert Vance, is the formidable CEO of Cygnus Systems, a sprawling tech empire that develops critical software and hardware for defense, healthcare, and global finance. He's a man whose tailored suits and steady, assessing gaze radiate an authority that commands any room he enters. My mother, Eleanor, complements him perfectly. She has a quiet grace but a mind like sharpened steel, the silent force and trusted advisor behind my father's throne. And then there's Leo, my younger brother, the company's CFO. He's a carbon copy of our father in his youth, brilliant, driven, and possessing a natural charisma that wins over everyone he meets. To the outside world, they are titans, the masterminds behind a billion-dollar dynasty. And me? I am the one who said no, the son who rejected a life of guaranteed wealth and power to pursue a duty they could never grasp, a calling they would always see as a failure. The moment I walk into the grand ballroom, the sheer scale of the event hits me. There must be 300 people here, maybe more. The atmosphere is dense with the mingling scents of designer fragrances and the delicate chime of champagne flutes. Everywhere I look, light catches on the sequins of evening dresses and the polished gleam of expensive watches. A young woman in a crisp hotel uniform approaches me with a professional smile, takes my invitation, and after a quick glance at her chart, directs me to my seat. "Table 17, sir, right over there." She points to a distant corner, almost an afterthought in the vast glittering room. I manage a tight smile and thank her, but her words land like a physical blow. A sharp, stinging pain radiates through my chest. Table 17. Not with the family at the main dais, not even close to the stage. It's a table for distant acquaintances, for guests of no real consequence. I knew this was coming, but the reality of it still feels like a shard of ice being pressed against my heart. It's a deliberate, calculated message. As I weave through the crowd toward my designated spot, I feel the weight of their gazes. A distant cousin offers a stiff, polite nod. An old family friend I haven't seen in years gives me a look that's half recognition, half sympathy. I can almost hear the unspoken thoughts behind their polite smiles. "That's Arthur, the eldest Vance boy." I overhear a woman murmur to the man beside her, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Still just a soldier, I hear. Such a pity. He had so much potential, could have been a true success." I force myself to ignore the comment, to act as if I heard nothing. I find my chair at table 17 and sink into it, the isolation immediate and profound. The others at my table are deep in a spirited debate about market trends and property investments. They give me a quick cursory glance and a nod before turning back to their world of finance, dismissing me as easily as if I were a waiter refilling their glasses. My presence is nothing more than a momentary distraction, a flicker in their peripheral vision. My eyes drift to the stage where Leo is basking in the spotlight. He looks triumphant in his tailored tuxedo, holding the hand of his bride, Amelia. She is undeniably lovely, her blonde hair catching the light and her smile genuine and bright. I watch as Leo throws his head back and laughs at something our father says, who stands beside them, raising his glass in a toast to the assembled crowd. The entire room, this entire universe, seems to orbit around them. The Vances, the embodiment of power and success. I lift my water glass, and the cool liquid does nothing to soothe the sour taste rising in my throat. It isn't the water, it's the sudden sharp sting of memory. I can't help but think back to a time when Leo and I were inseparable. We grew up together in a big, beautiful house in a quiet suburb of Maryland, with a huge green lawn that felt like our own private park and a swimming pool that glittered under the summer sun. Our father's words used to echo in my head, lessons delivered over family dinners with a gaze that was both demanding and affectionate. "You do what is right," he would tell us, his voice firm. "No matter the cost, that is what it means to carry our name." I took those words to heart. I built my life around that principle. So when the time came, I chose the citadel. I chose the military, and I chose a life of service, a path I was certain would honor his teachings and make him proud. I couldn't have been more wrong. The day I told him I was enlisting, he stared at me as if I had just confessed to a terrible crime. The look on his face was one of profound disappointment, of betrayal. "The military?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "You want to throw your life away in some drab barracks, collecting a meager salary when you could have a corner office with a view of the harbor?" Leo, only 18 then, was standing just behind him. He just shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. "Hey, if you want to go play soldier, be my guest," he said, the words a casual mix of mockery and dismissal. That was the moment the chasm between us opened, and with every passing year it has only grown wider and deeper. I buried myself in my work, pouring everything I had into it. I survived the brutal discipline of the citadel, and endured the long, isolating nights spent writing code in windowless server rooms at Fort Meade. The promotions came steadily, captain, then major, then colonel. Last year at 36, I was promoted to major general, making me one of the youngest to ever hold the rank. I commanded Operation Crimson Shield, a mission that neutralized a state-sponsored cyber offensive and protected millions of classified records. I built the Phantom Strike Division from nothing, an elite force that now counters the most sophisticated digital threats around the globe. I've testified in closed-door sessions before Congress defending our national security strategy. I even stood on a stage in Brussels to receive a commendation from the Allied Command, a ceremony I had desperately hoped my family would see. But they never came. I sent them emails. I sent formal invitations. The only response was a profound and unbreachable silence. My mother would call every few months, her voice laced with a familiar disappointment. "When are you going to stop this, Arthur?" she'd ask. "When are you coming home to the company?" My father was more direct. "Let me know when you're finished with this little game of yours." My gaze sweeps across the ballroom. A wave of applause erupts as Leo and Amelia slice into their towering wedding cake. The room is filled with the blinding pop of camera flashes, capturing their radiant, smiling faces for posterity. I force a smile, but inside, a quiet hurricane is building. It isn't anger, not really. I'm long past being angry at my family for their failure to understand me. I've grown accustomed to being the black sheep, the disappointment. Still, I can't pretend it doesn't sting. Each time I hear the whispers, the one who's just a soldier, the Vance family's great failure, it feels like a fresh, small wound. Do they ever wonder if maybe, just maybe, I chose this life not because I was naive, but because I saw a purpose in it? That my sense of worth isn't tied to a bank account or a headline? Suddenly, a man in a crisp army dress uniform is making his way toward my table. I recognize him immediately. It's Colonel David Peterson, a man I worked with closely during the Crimson Shield mission. He stops before me, snaps to attention, and delivers a sharp, respectful salute. "Major General Vance," he says, his voice clear and firm enough to cut through the surrounding chatter. "It's an honor to see you here, sir." A few people at the nearby tables turn their heads, their expressions shifting from disinterest to sudden curiosity. I quickly stand and return the gesture with a handshake and a relaxed smile. "David, good to see you. It's been too long. How have you been?" I keep my voice casual, trying to downplay the formality of the moment. He nods, his gaze unwavering and full of genuine respect. "Couldn't be better, sir. And you? I heard you just finished a major joint operation with our allies in Europe," he adds. I let out a short, quiet laugh and shake my head. "Today I'm just a wedding guest, David. No shop talk, just family." After he leaves, I settle back into my chair, acutely aware of the renewed stares from the tables around me. I can feel their eyes on my back. A woman I vaguely recognize as one of my mother's friends leans toward her dinner partner, her whisper loud enough for me to catch. "Major General? Surely that's not right. Arthur, a general? Impossible." I don't react. I don't turn. I just lift my glass and take another slow sip of water, feeling its cold path down my throat. There is nothing to say, nothing to prove to them right now. My time for explanations will come. In 1 week at the Cygnus Systems corporate tower, I have a meeting my father and Leo know nothing about. When I walk into that boardroom, I won't need to utter a single word of defense. My uniform, my rank, and the weight of the authority I carry will say everything that needs to be said. The reception moves on. There are dances, more speeches, endless toasts. I remain at my corner table, a silent observer. My father steps up to the microphone, his voice booming with pride as he raises a glass to Leo, his perfect son, the heir to his kingdom. My son, an extraordinary man who is taking Cygnus Systems to unprecedented levels of success, he declares, his voice resonating with absolute conviction. Thank you for being here to celebrate with us. The room erupts in applause. I join in, my hands moving mechanically. A thought flickers through my mind. If he knew the truth, if he had any idea who I've become, would he ever speak of me with that same pride? My father goes on, his speech a long tribute to Leo's accomplishments. I can't listen to anymore. I quietly stand and slip out onto a deserted balcony. Below me, the city sprawls out in a breathtaking panorama, a sea of glittering lights mimicking the night sky. I take a deep breath of the cool, crisp air, letting it clear my head. I didn't come here to start a fight or to demand recognition. I came because I made a promise to my mother. I came because, despite everything, they are still my family and I still love them, even if they can no longer see me for who I am. But I also know with a certainty that settles deep in my bones that this is only a prelude. The real confrontation is coming. In 1 week, in that Cygnus Systems boardroom, the carefully constructed walls of their world are going to come down. I won't have to raise my voice or make a single accusation. The truth will do all the work for me. I pull out my phone and find an old message in my sent folder. It's the email I sent my parents 3 years ago inviting them to the ceremony in Brussels where I received my commendation. Underneath it, the same thing I always saw. No response. I close my eyes for a moment, a faint, sad smile touching my lips. Then I switch off the screen and head back into the noise and the light. The night still had hours left to run, but I was prepared to see it through just as I had with every other mission in my life. Leo's wedding reception carried on deep into the evening, but my part in it was over. While the grand chandeliers of the Monarch Grand were being lowered to a soft glow and the staff made their final rounds with trays of wine, I made my exit without a single goodbye. The sound of the jazz band and the high-pitched laughter of the city's most powerful people followed me out into the corridor. But all I felt was an urgent need to break free from that suffocating gilded cage. Once on the street, the sharp bite of the night air felt like a relief. I watched my breath turn to mist in the cold. The city lights were a brilliant, indifferent spectacle against the dark sky, a beauty that couldn't penetrate the hollow space that had opened up inside me. It wasn't a flash of fury, it was the slow, persistent burn of sorrow, the familiar ache of a deep bruise being pressed. Honestly, I hold no anger toward my family. I made my peace long ago with the fact that they would never comprehend my world or the reasons I chose it. The real pain comes from their perception of me. It's the knowledge that in their eyes I am a cautionary tale, a 37-year-old man playing soldier, eternally lost and left behind, while my father and brother reign as titans of industry. They dismiss me as just a soldier, as if I've spent the last decade doing nothing more than shining my boots and waiting for my meager government paycheck. They have no clue that I'm a major general. They have no idea that the very same defense contracts their company is so desperate to secure must first cross my desk for final approval. And I have no intention of enlightening them. Not tonight. I catch a cab and give the driver the address of my parents' estate, where I'll be staying for the next few days before I have to report back to my command. Their home is a fortress of wealth nestled in the quiet, manicured suburbs, a massive mansion fronted by ornate iron gates with acres of perfect green grass and a swimming pool that shines like a sheet of polished obsidian in the moonlight. I remember a smaller house from my childhood, a place that felt like a home. They bought this estate after Cygnus Systems went public, a monument to everything they had achieved. As I let myself in, the sound of my footsteps is amplified by the cold marble of the grand foyer. Clara, the housekeeper who has been with my family for years, appears from one of the side corridors, her face breaking into a genuinely warm smile. "Arthur," she says, her voice full of affection. "It's so good to have you home. It's been too long." I smile back and thank her, but a part of me knows that her simple, honest welcome is likely the only real warmth I'll receive in this house. The living room is cavernous, with ceilings that stretch 2 stories high and walls adorned with museum-quality art. I stop in the center of the room, taking it all in. An entire wall is dedicated to a collection of framed photographs displayed on polished ebony shelves. There's one of my father and Leo at a major tech summit in Davos. Another shows Leo in his cap and gown, holding his Wharton MBA. Then there's my father, his face on the cover of Fortune magazine, the headline proclaiming him a titan of tomorrow. But there is no sign of me. Not one picture, not a single commendation. It's as if Arthur Vance, the son who chose a uniform over a boardroom, simply ceased to exist. I remember sending my mother a photograph from my promotion ceremony to Major General. It was a good shot, me in my dress blues, shaking hands with a 4-star NATO commander in front of the flag. She never put it up, maybe it didn't fit with the decor. My eyes land on a small, forgotten frame tucked away in a corner, a thin layer of dust dulling the glass. I pick it up. It's a family portrait from long ago. I must be about 10 years old, and Leo is a little kid of 6, all goofy smiles and missing teeth. We're all there together before everything changed. In the photo, my father's arm is draped protectively over my shoulders. My mother is holding Leo's small hand. All 4 of us are smiling, genuinely happy on a sunny day in a local park. I trace the edge of the frame with my finger, and the memories come rushing back, sharp and clear. That was the man who taught me about honor. The father who would look me straight in the eye and tell me that a man's worth was measured by his integrity, by his willingness to do the right thing when no one was watching. "Arthur," he used to say, his own eyes bright with conviction, "you have to be a man who stands for something." I built my entire life on that foundation, and now that same man can barely look at me without seeing a disappointment. The sound of soft footsteps on the marble floor pulls me from my thoughts. My mother appears in the doorway wrapped in a silk dressing gown, her silver hair catching the soft light from the lamps. "Arthur, you're home already?" she asks, her tone gentle but tinged with a familiar note of caution. I nod, forcing another smile. "Yes, Mom. It was a beautiful wedding, but I was feeling tired." She moves toward me as if to give me a hug, but then seems to think better of it, stopping a few feet away. She immediately changes the subject. "Leo was just magnificent tonight, wasn't he? And Amelia is such a dear. I know they'll have a wonderful life together." I agree, of course, but a question hangs unspoken in the air between us. Does she ever wonder about my life? Does my happiness ever cross her mind? I retreat upstairs to my old room. It's a large space, still preserved as it was, with a king-sized bed and tall windows that offer a perfect view of the moonlit pool. I sit on the edge of the mattress, pop the latches on my briefcase, and pull out a thick classified folder. The cover sheet reads, "Project Chimera." This is the multi-billion-dollar defense initiative that Cygnus Systems is pouring all its resources into winning. I scan the executive summary, making a few quick notes in the margins before securing the file again. In 1 week, I will sit across from my father and Leo in their own conference room. But I won't be there as a son or a brother. I'll be there as Major General Arthur Vance, the man who will ultimately decide the fate of their most important project. I don't want to dwell on that now. All I want is to close my eyes and find a few hours of oblivion to erase the memory of those pitying looks and whispered insults from the wedding. The next morning, I'm up before sunrise, running laps around the sprawling property. The air is cool and clean, but it does little to clear the weight from my mind. When I get back to the house, I find my father already seated at the head of the dining table, engrossed in the morning's financial news. He glances up as I enter, giving me a curt nod. "Arthur," he says, his tone clipped and impersonal. "Sit, have some breakfast." I take a seat opposite him, the silence between us as vast and cold as the polished mahogany table. My mother brings me a plate of food, offering a strained, silent smile before quickly retreating to the kitchen. The only sounds in the cavernous room are the scrape of forks on porcelain. "So, what did you think of the wedding?" my father asks, his eyes still glued to the stock market report. "It was a lovely ceremony," I say. "Leo seemed very happy." He nods, finally folding the newspaper and setting it aside. He looks directly at me for the first time. "And you? You're still with the army?" There's a slight pause in his voice, as if he can't quite bring himself to say the words. A small, humorless smile touches my lips. "Yes, Dad. Still there." I offer no more details. There's no point in mentioning my rank, the Allied Command Commendation, or the countless nights I've spent defending the country from digital threats. He wouldn't believe it, and even if he did, he wouldn't care. He takes a slow sip of his coffee. When he speaks again, his voice is quiet, but every word is a perfectly sharpened blade. "You know, Arthur, I look at you and I just don't get it. Leo is already a giant in his field, earning more in a month than most people see in a decade. And you're still hiding out in some barracks somewhere, living a life that makes no sense." My hand tightens around my fork until my knuckles are white. A hot surge of anger rises in my chest, but I force it back down, keeping my voice steady. "I'm proud of the work I do." He lets out a short, dismissive laugh, shaking his head. "Work? You call that work, Arthur? It's a pastime, a hobby for boys who don't want to grow up. One of these days, you'll wake up and understand what real responsibility looks like. When that happens, you let me know. I'll find a place for you at the company." I say nothing. I just look at him, at this man who once filled my head with ideals of honor and duty, now casually dismissing my entire life's work as meaningless. My mother sits between us, a silent, anxious spectator, her gaze darting back and forth. Finally, she finds her voice. "Robert, that's enough," she says softly. "Arthur has his own life." But my father just waves his hand, cutting her off. "Eleanor, you're missing the point. He has so much talent, and he's just throwing it all away. He's not like Leo." Those last words land like a punch to the gut. He's not like Leo. I slowly rise from my chair. "I'm finished," I say, my voice more level than I feel. "Thank you for breakfast, Mom." I walk out of the room without looking back, feeling my father's disappointed stare burning into me. I can't let him see the anger and hurt that I know is showing in my eyes. Later that afternoon, I decide to visit Leo at his office. I need to offer him my congratulations in person to see if I can find even a faint echo of the bond we used to share. His office is on the 40th floor of a gleaming glass and steel tower downtown, a corner suite with a breathtaking view of the entire city laid out below. He's seated behind a massive modern desk, wearing an impeccable gray suit and studying a complex financial model on a wide screen. When he notices me in the doorway, he gets up, a practiced corporate smile on his face. "Arthur," he says, extending a hand. "Didn't know you were stopping by." The handshake is brief and cool, the kind you exchange with a business acquaintance, not a brother. "I just wanted to say congratulations again," I say, taking the seat he gestures toward. "It was a beautiful wedding." Leo grins, leaning back in his expensive leather chair. "Thanks. Amelia and I spent a year planning every last detail. It cost a king's ransom, but it was worth every penny." He studies me for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "So you're still in the army?" There it is again, that same question delivered with the same faint note of disbelief. I just nod. "Yeah, still there." He lets out a short laugh, but there's no real humor in it. "You really are something else, Arthur. Dad's not wrong, you know. You could be running half this city, but you're still playing soldier. What is it? Do you get off on the whole hero thing? I look at him, at this stranger who was once my little brother, the kid who used to follow me everywhere, begging me to play catch in the backyard. Now he looks at me and sees nothing but a failure. I believe in what I do, I reply, my voice flat. Leo just shrugs, his attention already drifting back to his monitor. Whatever you say, but don't be naive. Money and power are what make the world go round. The military isn't going to give you either of those things. If you ever come to your senses, just say the word. I'm sure I could find something for you here. It wouldn't be glamorous, but it would be a start. A smile plays on my lips, but it's a mask. Inside, I feel a cold fury gathering. I don't need his charity, I don't want his pity. In less than a week, he will walk into his own boardroom and find me sitting at the head of the table in my dress uniform. The man with the final say on the contract that he and my father have bet their entire company on. For now, though, I just nod. Thanks, Leo, I say, rising to my feet. I should get going. All the best to you and Amelia. As the elevator descends, carrying me back down to the real world, a profound weight settles in my chest. It's not what Leo said that hurts. It's the stark realization that the family I grew up with, the people I thought I knew, are gone. They don't see me. They don't even want to try. I step out onto the busy sidewalk, pull in a long, slow breath of city air and repeat the words that have become my mantra. One more week, then everything changes. When I get back to the house that evening, I find my parents entertaining guests. The living room is filled with their friends, powerful executives, investors, the usual faces from the city's upper crust. My plan is to sneak past them and head upstairs unnoticed, but my mother spots me from across the room. Arthur, come and say hello to everyone, she calls out, her voice bright and insistent. Reluctantly, I step into the living room. It's a scene of casual luxury, with people draped over expensive sofas, sipping wine and talking business. My father performs the introductions, but his tone is flat, devoid of any pride. This is my older son, Arthur. He's in the military. One of the men, a portly executive I vaguely recognize, lets out a booming laugh. The military, is that right? You didn't want to join the family business? Cygnus is taking over the world. A ripple of polite laughter spreads through the group. They all think it's a great joke. I force a smile. I enjoy my career, I say simply, but they're not finished with me. A woman dripping in pearls and diamonds leans forward. Oh, but what a shame, she coos. With your family name, you should be a captain of industry by now. My father chuckles into his wine glass. That's what I keep telling him, but Arthur here, he'd rather be an ordinary soldier. I have no idea what goes on in that head of his. His dismissive tone, the casual mockery in his voice, cues another round of laughter at my expense. I stand there in the center of the room, feeling each condescending word like a physical blow. A part of me wants to scream, to tell them exactly who I am, to describe the kind of power I hold in my hands, a power they can't even comprehend. But I bite my tongue. I simply nod, murmur my excuses, and walk away. I retreat to my room, closing the door behind me and leaning against it, my heart hammering against my ribs. I fall back onto the bed and stare up at the blank white ceiling. One more week, I think the words a silent, furious promise. Just one more week and then they'll all see. After 3 days of this polite, soul-crushing torment, it was time for me to go. As I was leaving, my father shook my hand, his expression unreadable. If you ever decide to get serious about your life, the offer still stands, he said, his voice level. There will always be a job for you at Cygnus. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I didn't need his job. I had forged my own place in the world, and in a few short days he was going to see just how far I had come. I went back to my apartment near Fort Meade. It's a simple, functional space. Plain white walls, a sturdy old desk, and shelves overflowing with technical manuals and classified briefing books. I spent the next few days catching up on emails and methodically preparing my presentation for the Cygnus Systems meeting. I wasn't anxious. I've spent my entire career under immense pressure, standing in front of rooms full of generals and world leaders. My decisions impacting global security, this was no different. Except, of course, it was completely different. This time I would be facing my own father and brother, and I wouldn't be Arthur, the family disappointment. I would be Major General Vance, the senior military official with final authority over their most critical venture. The day before the meeting, I went into my office at the command center. There's a palpable tension in that building, a unique energy you only find in places like this. It's in the quiet, focused click of keyboards, the static hiss of encrypted comms, and the heavy silence of men and women who understand that a single keystroke can have life or death consequences. A colonel on my staff, a sharp analyst named Mark, came into my office with a thick binder. "General," he said, setting the folder on my desk. "This is the final due diligence report on Project Chimera." I nodded, already flipping through the pages. "Thanks, Mark. Anything I should be aware of?" He shook his head. "Everything checks out on the technical side, sir. But Cygnus seems to be having some issues with their financial projections. We've flagged several questionable expenditures and some inconsistencies in their cost analysis." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I read the section he was referring to. Leo was the CFO. He was personally overseeing the financial proposal for this project. If there were irregularities, it was his signature on the documents. It was his neck on the line. I looked up at Mark. "Keep this under wraps," I told him, my voice low. "I'll deal with it in the meeting tomorrow." The next morning, I put on my full Class A uniform. The deep blue jacket felt heavy on my shoulders, the rows of ribbons and polished insignia on my chest a testament to a life lived in service. I stood in front of the mirror, not as Arthur Vance, the son, but as the man I had become. I wasn't wearing this uniform to intimidate or to gloat. I was wearing it because it was my truth. This was who I was, the man who had stayed the course even when his own family had written him off. An official car with a driver from my command picked me up. We drove in silence to the Cygnus Systems corporate headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that dominated the city skyline. As the vehicle pulled up to the main entrance, I took one last deep breath and got out. Today was the day. I walked into the massive marble-floored lobby. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly when she saw my uniform. Before she could even speak, a young executive assistant hurried over. "Major General Vance, right this way, please." He led me toward the executive elevators that went to the top floor. As we walked, I could feel the eyes of every employee we passed. They didn't know me, but they recognized the rank. I could hear the hushed whispers and see the subtle pointing, but I tuned it all out. Their opinions didn't matter. My focus was entirely on my father and brother, on the moment they would finally see me. The boardroom was exactly as I'd pictured it. A vast, sterile space dominated by a long, polished ebony table and a panoramic view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. My father was at the far end, impeccably dressed in a dark gray suit, conversing with a few of his senior vice presidents. Leo was beside him, scrolling through documents on a tablet, his expression a mixture of tension and self-assurance. The chairman of the board, a man named Thomas Reed, was waiting for me at the head of the table. Thomas was an old colleague, a man I respected and had worked with on a sensitive joint initiative with our European allies. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a warm, genuine smile. "Arthur," he said, his voice full of respect, "it's good to have you here." I smiled back. Good to see you too, Thomas. I took my designated seat at the head of the table, and I could feel the entire mood of the room change in an instant. My father looked up, and for a split second I saw pure, unadulterated shock flash in his eyes. He recovered quickly, turning his head away, pretending he hadn't seen me. Leo just stared, his brow furrowed in confusion. He leaned over and whispered something to the executive next to him. I could guess what they were thinking. What is he doing here? What is Arthur doing in that uniform? He must be some low-level liaison. I remained silent, placing my briefing book on the table and waiting for the meeting to begin. Thomas tapped his pen lightly on the table, calling the room to order. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. As you know, we are here today to present our final proposal for Project Chimera, a contract of critical importance to both this company and the Department of Defense. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. And it is my distinct honor to introduce the senior military representative who holds the final signatory authority on this project. He turned to me, a small smile playing on his lips. Please welcome Major General Arthur R. Vance, Director of Cyber Strategy Integration and Defense Relations for the United States Army's Digital Warfare Command. A stunned, absolute silence descended upon the room. It was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. I felt the weight of every single pair of eyes turning to me. A sudden, intense focus that was almost physical. Across the table, my father froze, his hand holding his coffee cup suspended halfway to his lips. Leo's head snapped around so fast I thought he might hurt himself, his jaw hanging open, his face a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. The other executives started murmuring to each other, frantically flipping through their presentation materials as if searching for a name they had somehow overlooked. I sat perfectly still, my back straight, and met the chairman's gaze with a calm, steady nod. "Thank you, Mr. Reed," I said, my voice even and clear. "I'm ready to proceed when you are." My father made a strange, choking sound, trying to collect himself. "Arthur," he stammered, his voice shaking just enough for me to notice. You're a major general?" I looked directly at him, my expression calm but unyielding. "Yes, sir, I am." Beside him, Leo was just shaking his head, muttering under his breath, "This isn't possible. It can't be." Thomas, the chairman, cut through the tension with a firm, authoritative tone. "Major General Vance is one of the nation's foremost experts in cyber warfare. We are extremely privileged to have him leading this review." My heart was hammering in my chest, but it wasn't from anxiety. It was a strange, toxic cocktail of triumph and sorrow. For 10 years, I had imagined this moment, the instant when the blinders would finally be ripped from my family's eyes, when they would be forced to see me not as their failure, but as the man I had truly become. But seeing the shock on their faces brought me no joy. Instead, a profound sadness washed over me. Why did it have to come to this? Why did I need the uniform, the rank, the power of this boardroom for them to finally see me? Why wasn't I ever enough on my own? The boardroom at Cygnus Systems was still humming with stunned whispers, but I brought the room to order. From my position at the head of the long table, my dress uniform a stark contrast to the sea of expensive business suits, I let my eyes travel across the room. I saw the senior executives, their faces a mixture of confusion and newfound respect. I saw the junior associates, their pens flying across notepads. And I saw my father and my brother, both of whom were now sitting in a state of stunned, motionless silence. I couldn't let my personal history with them cloud my judgment. Not in this room, not on this day. Here I was, Major General Arthur Vance, and I had a job to do. My responsibility was to ensure that Project Chimera wasn't just another lucrative government contract, but a flawless, unbreachable cybersecurity shield capable of protecting the entire nation. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice calm but infused with the unmistakable weight of command. "Let's be clear. Project Chimera is not just a technology initiative. It will become a core component of our national defense infrastructure. As such, every single line of code, every line item in the budget will be subjected to the most rigorous possible scrutiny. I will require a complete and transparent accounting of your proposed security architecture and your financial framework. Let's begin. My gaze settled on Leo, and I held it there, my expression unreadable. Leo, my little brother, the one who had so casually dismissed me as a deluded hero just a few days ago, was now nervously adjusting his silk tie, his usual confidence completely gone. He shot a desperate, pleading look toward our father, but my father offered no help. He just sat there, staring down at the polished table, his knuckles white as he gripped his pen. General?" Leo began, his voice cracking slightly. We've streamlined the entire cost structure for optimal performance. All projected expenses have been fully documented." He pushed a stack of financial reports across the table toward me, but his movements were jerky and uncertain. I saw the slight tremor in his hand, and I knew he was bluffing. He wasn't sure of his own numbers. I began to leaf through the pages, my eyes quickly scanning the columns of figures. I already knew what I was looking for, remembering the red flags Colonel Peterson's team had identified. "The $47 million allocation to your Zurich branch," I said, my tone even but sharp. "The documentation here is vague. I need you to explain in detail what that expenditure is for." I looked straight at him, not as his older brother, but as the senior government official who held his company's future in his hands. The silence in the room became so absolute that the soft ticking of the clock on the wall sounded like a drumbeat. Leo swallowed, his hands fumbling as he shuffled through his own papers, desperately trying to find an answer that wasn't there. That's an investment in supplemental R&D, he finally managed to say, but the words had no conviction. "Supplemental R&D, I repeated, arching an eyebrow. "Then you should have no problem providing this committee with a detailed report on that research and its findings. Because according to our intelligence, that particular branch has not produced a single piece of relevant analysis for this project in over 24 months. I slid a separate slim folder across the table toward him, the one containing the counter-analysis from my team at the Digital Warfare Command. The color drained from Leo's face. He looked like he'd been punched. Next to him, one of the senior VPs cleared his throat, a pathetic attempt to cut the unbearable tension. My father finally lifted his head, his gaze shifting back and forth between me and Leo, his expression one of utter disbelief. I refused to look at him. I couldn't bear to see the shame and disappointment that I knew would be written all over his face. This wasn't personal. This was my duty. The same duty I had been performing for the last decade, a duty that always came before family, before emotion, before anything else. "General," another executive, a woman named Catherine Shaw, interjected, her voice cautious and diplomatic. "We will conduct a full internal audit of this expenditure and provide you with a comprehensive report. I'm certain this is just a simple clerical error." I nodded, my face a neutral mask. "I will expect that report on my desk within 48 hours. The security of this nation cannot afford any clerical errors." I let the words hang in the air, and the room seemed to collectively hold its breath. I didn't let up. I pivoted from the financials to their security architecture, demanding that their lead engineers walk me through their source code line by line. I identified a critical weakness in their primary encryption algorithm. If a hostile actor were to find and exploit this vulnerability, I said, my voice dropping to an icy calm, your entire network would be compromised in under 3 hours. I want a full mitigation and remediation plan by end of day. The engineers on their side of the table nodded furiously, their pens scratching across their legal pads. Leo just sat there, staring at the table, looking as if he wished the floor would open up and swallow him whole. Finally, my father spoke. His voice was raw, hoarse, as if it took a monumental effort to form the words. General Vance, he corrected himself, the title sounding foreign and strange on his lips. We will address these issues immediately. We will ensure that every one of your concerns is addressed. Cygnus Systems is fully committed to its partnership with the Department of Defense. I nodded, finally allowing my eyes to meet his. I trust that you are, Mr. Vance, I said, my tone strictly professional. Hearing my father address me by my rank in front of his entire executive team filled me with a complex feeling I couldn't immediately name. It was more than just pride. It was a profound, hard-won sense of validation. The meeting lasted for another 3 hours. I controlled the flow, steering the conversation with the practiced precision of a military commander. Every question I asked, every demand I made was laser-focused on one objective: ensuring that Project Chimera would be absolutely ironclad. I wasn't being punitive. I wasn't letting my personal history with the men across the table color my professional judgment. I wasn't there to humiliate my father or my brother. I was there to uphold my duty, to do the right thing. The very principle my father had drilled into me as a child, a lesson he himself seemed to have long since forgotten. When the meeting finally adjourned, the Cygnus executives lined up to shake my hand, their faces now showing a mixture of awe and genuine respect. As I was leaving, I overheard one of them whisper to another, "I had no idea Vance's other son was a 2-star general." "Damn impressive," the other one replied. I ignored them. I gathered my files ready to make my exit when Thomas Reed, the chairman, came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "You handled that perfectly, Arthur," he said, his voice warm. "I always knew you'd go far." I managed a small smile and thanked him, but all I wanted was to get out of that room, away from the prying eyes and the hushed conversations. My father and Leo didn't leave with the others. They hung back, lingering by the door, clearly waiting for me. I knew they wanted to talk, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear what they had to say. I stepped out into the hallway, the cool air from the atrium a welcome relief. The same young assistant from earlier hurried over. "General Vance," she said, "Mr. Reed would like to see you in his private office." I nodded, already knowing this wasn't about a follow-up briefing. This was it. This was the confrontation I had been avoiding for a decade. Thomas's personal office was a corner suite with a stunning view of the harbor. When I walked in, they were all there waiting for me. My father, Leo, and my mother. Thomas stood behind his large mahogany desk and offered me a sympathetic smile. "I'll give you all some privacy," he said, and then quietly slipped out, closing the heavy door behind him. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. I remained standing, my uniform suddenly feeling heavy and constricting. My father stared at me, his face a canvas of shock, confusion, and a shame so profound it was painful to witness. My mother was sitting on a leather sofa, her eyes puffy and red, as if she had been weeping for some time. Leo stood by the window with his back to me, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, refusing to meet my eyes. "Arthur," my father finally said, his voice unsteady, "why didn't you ever tell us about any of this?" He gestured vaguely at my uniform, at the rows of ribbons that represented my entire adult life. I looked him straight in the eye, the accumulated pain and resentment of the last 10 years rising up in me. I fought to keep my voice even. "I did, Dad. I sent you an invitation to every single one of my promotion ceremonies. I told you when I was leading Operation Crimson Shield. I sent you the press release when I received the Allied Command Commendation. I even sent you the pictures. You never replied. You never once asked." My mother let out a small, strangled sob, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Arthur, I had no idea. she whispered. I just assumed. I thought you had some kind of desk job. I never understood what it was you were really doing. Her voice cracked, and despite everything, I felt a sharp pang in my own chest. I wanted to go to her, to put my arms around her and tell her it was all right, but a wall of unspoken words and years of distance stood between us. I remained where I was, a silent statue in my own uniform, looking from my mother to my father and then to my brother. Leo finally turned around from the window. His voice was quiet, stripped of all its usual arrogance. General, he corrected himself, the title still awkward on his tongue. I'm sorry, I was an ass. I made fun of you. I thought you were less than. You've earned this. You've earned all of it. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. A part of me wanted to let it all go in that instant, to tell him it was forgotten, to try and reclaim some small piece of the brotherhood we had lost. But the other part of me, the part that had been wounded and ignored for a decade, couldn't let go that easily. My father took a hesitant step toward me. Arthur, he said, his voice thick with emotion. All this time I thought you needed my help. I thought you were lost, that you were squandering your life. I was so wrong. He paused, seeming to fight for control. I am so proud of you. Those were the words I had been waiting to hear for 10 years. Hearing them now, a fragile warmth bloomed in my chest, but it was tangled with an overwhelming sadness. I just wanted you to respect my choice, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. That's all I ever wanted, for you to see that my path had value, even if it wasn't the one you chose for me. My father nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, as if he was seeing all the lost years spooling out behind him. You're right, he said, his voice soft. I didn't see you. I was blind. I am so sorry. I couldn't find the words to reply. I just gave a single sharp nod and turned away, my own heart a heavy aching weight in my chest. I hadn't come here for a victory lap. I hadn't come to make them grovel. I had just wanted them to see me, the real me, not the caricature they had created in their minds, a failure measured against their own narrow definitions of wealth and success. I walked out of the office and back into the sunlit hallway. A week ago, I had been the family joke, the ordinary soldier. Today, I was Major General Arthur Vance, the man who had brought a billion-dollar corporation to a dead stop. But underneath the uniform, I was still just Arthur. Still the son, still the brother who had never given up hope that one day his family might finally understand. I went back to my apartment, back to the quiet, unassuming space that was my sanctuary. I took off the heavy dress uniform and hung it carefully in the closet. The physical weight was gone, but the emotional weight remained. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and started going through my secure emails. A new message from Colonel Peterson was at the top of the list. The subject line was Project Chimera, and the preliminary findings of his internal audit confirmed everything I had suspected. Leo's financial models were riddled with inconsistencies. It wasn't fraud, not in the criminal sense, but it was evidence of gross mismanagement and a dangerous lack of oversight. I composed a carefully worded, encrypted message to Thomas Reed, the chairman of Cygnus. I laid out the facts and strongly recommended that they clean up their own house before the Department of Defense was forced to launch a formal investigation. This does not appear to be malicious, I wrote, but it represents a significant risk to the project's integrity and must be rectified immediately. I hit send, and a small measure of relief washed over me. I had done the right thing. I hadn't destroyed my brother, but I had given him the opportunity and the imperative to correct his own failures. In the days that followed, I threw myself back into my work at the command center, losing myself in the familiar world of encrypted data streams, threat assessments, and strategic planning. But my family was a constant low-level hum in the back of my mind. I kept seeing my mother's tearful face in that office. I kept hearing the tremor in my father's voice as he finally said he was proud of me. And I kept thinking about Leo, my little brother, now forced to confront the consequences of his own hubris. About a week after the disastrous boardroom meeting, an email from Leo appeared in my personal inbox. The subject line was a single word: "Thanks." I opened it, my heart rate quickening just a little as I read. "Arthur," it said, "I've gone over the entire financial proposal for Chimera just like you said. You were right. I messed up. There were things I overlooked and I'm fixing them now. Thank you for giving me the chance to do that, for not blowing it all up in the meeting. I was an idiot. I underestimated you and I'm sorry. If you're free anytime soon, I'd like to get together, just the two of us." I read the message 3 times, a fragile warmth spreading through my chest. I typed a quick reply. "Good. I'm free on Saturday. Meet me at the Daily Grind." It was a small, unassuming coffee shop in our old neighborhood, a place where we had spent countless hours as teenagers drinking terrible coffee and talking about our futures. Leo's response came back almost instantly. "See you then." I put my phone down, a flicker of something that felt dangerously like hope kindling inside me. I wanted to believe that this was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild what we had lost. But I also knew that the path back to each other would be a long and difficult one. That Saturday, I drove out to the suburbs. I was wearing a plain t-shirt and jeans. No uniform, no rank, no medals. I wanted to meet Leo as his brother, not as a general. When I walked into the coffee shop, he was already there, sitting at our old table in the back corner, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him. He saw me and stood up, and the smile that spread across his face was the first real one I'd seen from him in a decade. "Arthur," he said, his voice quiet. "Thanks for meeting me." We sat and talked for a while. It was awkward at first. We talked about his work, about Amelia, about the unseasonably warm weather. Then Leo took a deep breath and looked me square in the eye. "Arthur, I need to say this again," he began. "I am so sorry. For years I looked down on you. I thought you were a failure. I was completely wrong. What you've accomplished, the man you've become. I had no idea. I was so arrogant. I was so blind." I looked at him and I could see the truth of his words in his eyes. "It's okay, Leo," I said. "I don't need you to be impressed by me. I just need you to respect my choices." He nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "I've completely overhauled the Chimera proposal," he said. "Thomas says it's solid now, and I learned something important, not just about spreadsheets and budgets, but about what it really means to be accountable." I smiled, a genuine feeling of relief washing over me. "Good. You're a smart guy, Leo. I always knew you'd figure it out." We talked for another hour, about our childhood, about the stupid arguments we used to have, about the wild, impossible dreams we once shared. By the time we walked out of that coffee shop, I felt like a small piece of the vast, empty chasm between us had finally been bridged. It wasn't completely healed, not by a long shot, but for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that one day we might actually be brothers again. A few days after that, I received another email. This one was from my father. It was a company-wide memo that had been sent to every single employee at Cygnus Systems, but he had copied me on it directly. To the entire Cygnus team, it began. "I want to share something with all of you that I have only recently come to understand. My son, Major General Arthur Vance, is an extraordinary man. He is a national leader in his field, and he is a source of immense pride for our family. For too long, I failed to see his true worth, and for that, I am deeply sorry. We are honored to have his guidance on Project Chimera, and I hope we can all learn from his example of service and integrity." I read the email twice, a lump forming in my throat, my eyes starting to burn. My father hadn't just apologized to me in private. He had admitted his failure, his blindness to his entire company. It was a gesture of humility I never would have expected from him. I picked up the phone and called him. He answered on the first ring, and his voice sounded younger, lighter than I had heard it in years. "Arthur," he said, "you got my email." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Yeah, Dad," I said, my own voice a little shaky. "I got it. Thank you." He was silent for a long moment. "I was wrong, son," he finally said. "I didn't see you. I want to try and fix that. When you have some leave, come home. Your mother wants to see you." I smiled. A weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying finally lifting from my shoulders. "I'll be there, Dad. Soon." 6 months passed. When I next returned to my parents' house, everything felt different. The moment I walked through the door, my mother hurried over and wrapped me in a tight hug, her eyes shining. "Arthur," she said, her voice full of a joy I hadn't heard in years, "I made your favorite, a lemon meringue pie." I laughed and hugged her back, the familiar scent of her perfume a welcome comfort. My father was standing right behind her. He shook my hand, and this time the gesture was warm and strong, not stiff and formal. "It's good to have you home, son," he said. Leo was there too with Amelia. He came over and put an arm around my shoulder, a wide, easy grin on his face. "No boardrooms this time, big brother," he said. "Just family." We all gathered in the living room, and that's when I saw it. It was a small change, but it meant everything. There on the wall right next to my father's fortune cover and Leo's Wharton diploma was a new, beautifully framed photograph. It was the picture of me in my dress uniform shaking hands with the NATO commander in Brussels. I stared at it, a slow, deep warmth spreading through my chest. "Who put this up?" I asked, my voice soft. My mother smiled. "Your father did," she said. "He told me it was time this house was proud of both of its sons." That evening, for the first time in more than a decade, I felt like I was truly home. We sat around the dinner table and we talked and we laughed, and for the first time they asked me about my life, about my work. My mother wanted to know all about the new artificial intelligence training protocols I was developing. "Is it like in the movies, Arthur?" she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. I laughed and tried to explain it in the simplest possible terms, knowing she was only grasping a fraction of it, but she listened intently, nodding along. My father asked me to tell him about Operation Crimson Shield, and this time, he wasn't just waiting for his turn to speak. He was actually listening. He was hearing me. Leo even mentioned that he had implemented one of my cybersecurity recommendations on a new platform Cygnus was developing. "It's 100 times more secure than our old system," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "You really are a genius, you know that?" After dinner, I went out into the garden alone and stood by the edge of the pool, watching the moonlight dance on the surface of the water. A few minutes later, my mother came out and joined me, carrying one of my old jackets. "It's getting cold out here, Arthur," she said, draping it over my shoulders. I smiled and thanked her. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "not because of your rank or your medals, but because you are a good man, and because you are my son." I looked at her, my eyes suddenly burning. "I know, Mom," I managed to say. "Thank you." In that moment, a sense of peace settled over me, a feeling I hadn't realized was even possible. My family was far from perfect. We had wasted so much time, and the scars of those lost years would probably never completely fade. But we were trying. We were finally, after all this time, trying to find our way back to each other. And maybe in the end, that was all that really mattered. A few days later, I was back in the familiar high-stakes world of the Digital Warfare Command. As I was unpacking my bag in my office, I found a small handwritten note tucked inside one of the pockets of my uniform. It was from my mother. "Arthur," it read, "I just wanted to say it again. I am so proud of you. Not for what you've done, but for who you are. All my love." I smiled and placed the note on my desk right next to my Allied Command commendation, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a genuine spark of hope for the future. My family was finally learning to see me for who I was, and I was finally learning to let go of the pain of the past and look toward the future.